About 3 years ago, I was working in a massive factory that never really felt alive, even though it was full of people. The building was huge, the ceilings high, and the constant noise of machines made it feel like your thoughts were being drowned out every second of the day. The company didn't hire workers directly. Instead, they relied on 5 different temp agencies, which meant people were always coming and going. One week you'd recognize the faces around you, and the next week half of them would be gone, replaced by strangers who didn't even bother learning names. There was no sense of belonging there, no friendships, no accountability. Everyone just clocked in, survived their shift, and left. That kind of environment does something to people. It makes them careless. It makes them bold. It makes them think they can get away with things. I learned that the hard way, when my lunches started disappearing. I worked 12-hour shifts 6 days in a row, the kind of shifts that drain you physically and mentally. By the time lunch rolled around, my legs would ache, my hands would feel stiff, and my mind would be begging for a break. Lunch wasn't just food to me. It was the one moment of peace I had during the day, something warm, something familiar, something that reminded me I was human. The first day my lunch went missing, I stood in front of the fridge longer than I should have. I stared at the shelves, thinking maybe I'd placed it somewhere else. Maybe I grabbed the wrong bag that morning. I felt annoyed, but I told myself it was my own fault. The second day, it happened again. That's when the irritation settled into my chest. I checked every shelf, every corner, nothing. I went back to my station hungry, trying to ignore the tight feeling in my stomach. By the third day, my hunger was impossible to hide. My stomach growled so loudly during my shift that the guy next to me laughed and joked about it. I laughed too, but my face felt hot with embarrassment. By the 5th day, the frustration had turned into anger. 6 straight 12-hour shifts with no lunch. Every single time I opened that fridge and saw the empty space where my food should have been, I felt disrespected. Someone was watching me bring my lunch every day and deciding it didn't matter, that I didn't matter. In that factory, everyone was a suspect, because no one really knew anyone else. People rotated through constantly, and that anonymity gave cover to whoever was doing this. I started paying attention, watching who lingered near the fridge, who glanced around before opening it, who avoided eye contact afterward, but nothing was obvious. I thought about reporting it, going to a supervisor, but deep down I already knew how that conversation would go. They'd shrug, maybe send out a reminder, tell people to label their food. Nothing would change. Whoever was stealing felt untouchable, and that realization pushed me to a breaking point. That's when the darker thoughts started creeping in. I didn't want to confront anyone directly. I didn't want drama. I didn't want a lecture. I just wanted it to stop. And late that night, exhausted and angry, I remembered the Carolina Reaper pepper I had at home. One of the hottest peppers in the world. The thought stayed with me longer than I expected. I wasn't trying to seriously hurt anyone. I just wanted whoever was stealing my lunch to experience consequences, to understand that taking something that wasn't theirs came with a price. That night, I cooked with more care than I had in weeks. I made steak fajitas. I seasoned the meat slowly, letting it marinate, letting the flavors soak in. I sliced peppers and onions, cooked everything just right, and filled my kitchen with a smell so good it almost made me forget how angry I was. Then I prepared the pico de gallo, tomatoes, onion, cilantro, lime juice. And finally, the Carolina Reaper. I wore gloves. Even then, the air burned my eyes. My fingers tingled. I minced it finely, making sure it blended perfectly. No visible warning, no obvious chunks, just enough heat to make a statement. When everything was done, I packed the meal carefully into a clear container. I even garnished it with fresh cilantro and lime wedges. It looked incredible, tempting. I didn't hide it or disguise it. I wanted it to stand out. I wanted whoever had been stealing my lunches to choose it willingly. The next morning, I placed it in the fridge like always. Same shelf, same spot. Then I walked away and tried to focus on my shift. About an hour later, everything changed. I heard screaming. Not yelling, not complaining. Screaming, the kind that cuts straight through industrial noise and makes your heart stop. People dropped what they were doing and started running toward the break room. I followed, my pulse pounding in my ears. On the floor was a woman I barely recognized, someone I'd seen around but never spoken to. Her face was red, eyes wide with panic, hands clawing at her chest. She was gasping for air, each breath shallow and broken. Someone shouted that she couldn't breathe. Another worker was already on the phone calling for help. And in that moment, it all clicked. She was the one. The lunchbox bandit. The Carolina Reaper had triggered a severe asthma attack. Paramedics arrived quickly, placing an oxygen mask over her face and lifting her onto a stretcher. The room was silent as they rushed her out. No one spoke. No one accused anyone. My empty food container sat in the trash like a quiet confession. She never said a word. Neither did I. Weeks later, she returned to work. She kept to herself, avoided eye contact, and from that day forward, my lunches were never touched again. Not once. There was no confrontation, no punishment handed down by management, no dramatic ending, just consequences. Every time I opened the fridge and saw my food exactly where I left it, I felt relief, validation, closure. I don't feel proud of what I did, but I don't feel guilty either. In a place where people felt invisible, sometimes the only justice that exists is the kind people bring upon themselves. And from that day on, everyone in that factory thought twice before touching something that didn't belong to them.